The unusual proposal, the Tuesday morning rush in downtown Crescent City always carried the same rhythm. Honking taxis weaving through tight corners, hurried commuters clutching coffee cups like lifelines, and polished executives striding with determined focus toward glass towers that gleamed in the early light. Among them was Maya Lopez, her dark hair pinned into a neat bun, navy blazer freshly pressed, and laptop bag resting firmly on her shoulder. She moved with purpose, but unlike many of the frantic professionals around her, Maya had learned the art of calm persistence. At 27, she had carved out a modest but respectable place at Blake Innovations, one of the city's most competitive technology companies. Maya was not the loudest voice in the conference room, nor the one constantly seeking the spotlight. Instead, she thrived on details, small insights others often missed. Her marketing reports had quietly boosted product launches, helping transform them from risky to remarkably successful. Colleagues respected her for her precision and reliability, though few truly knew her outside the office. For Maya, work had become both shield and compass, guiding her through the uncertainty that often came with being a young woman in a demanding industry. That morning, she stepped into the lobby of Blake Innovations, its marble floors gleaming under a wash of sunlight. Security guards nodded as she passed, and the receptionist offered her a familiar smile. Maya checked her watch. 40 minutes until the weekly marketing update. She quickened her pace toward the elevators, balancing her coffee cup in one hand and reviewing mental notes on quarterly numbers. The doors slid open and she slipped inside, surrounded by the faint hum of chatter and the scent of cologne from suited professionals. By the time she reached the 12th floor, the marketing department was buzzing with activity. Assistants rushed between cubicles, printers spat out endless proposals, and voices overlapped in hurried discussions. Maya set her coffee on her desk, tucked away in a corner near the windows, and powered up her laptop. Her desk was a reflection of her personality: organized folders, sticky notes in precise colors, and a small cactus plant that somehow flourished despite the fluorescent lighting. She slipped easily into her work rhythm, tapping numbers into spreadsheets, adjusting presentation slides, and reviewing campaign analytics. "Maya, you have a visitor." The voice belonged to Clara, the team's secretary, who rarely looked flustered. Yet today her expression carried a curious mix of surprise and urgency. Maya blinked, adjusting her glasses. "A visitor? I don't have any meetings scheduled this morning." Clara leaned closer, lowering her tone. "It's Mr. Blake. He's waiting in conference room 1 and specifically asked for you." Maya's heart skipped. Adrian Blake, the CEO, rarely interacted with employees outside the executive circle. In her 3 years at the company, Maya had only seen him at all staff meetings where his presence commanded the room effortlessly. His reputation stretched beyond the company walls, sharp-minded, ambitious, and known for making ruthless but calculated decisions that propelled Blake Innovations into the top tier of the industry. For many, Adrian Blake represented the pinnacle of success. For Maya, he was almost mythic, a figure glimpsed from afar. "Are you sure he asked for me?" she whispered. "Positive," Clara confirmed. "By name. You'd better not keep him waiting." Maya closed her laptop with trembling fingers, grabbed her notebook, though she had no clue what she might need to jot down, and began the long walk down the corridor. Each step felt strangely heavy, as though she were crossing into unknown territory. She paused briefly outside the frosted glass door of conference room 1, inhaled deeply, and then knocked. "Come in," a voice responded. Maya pushed the door open. The room was large and minimalist, its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline, but she barely noticed the view. At the head of the polished wooden table sat Adrian Blake, his presence commanding even in stillness. He was in his mid-30s, his dark hair effortlessly styled, his suit impeccably tailored, his blue-gray eyes fixed on her with quiet intensity. And for a fleeting moment Maya felt as if he could read every thought racing through her mind. "Miss Lopez," he said smoothly. "Please sit down." She placed her notebook on the table and sat 2 chairs away from him, her posture careful, professional. "Mr. Blake, you asked for me?" "Yes," he said, his tone steady yet carrying an undercurrent of something unusual. "And before I explain, I want you to know this conversation is entirely outside of your professional duties. Nothing said here will affect your role at the company. Consider it a personal request." The words unsettled her. Adrian Blake, known for his unshakable professionalism, was asking something personal? "I understand," Maya said cautiously. He leaned back, studying her for a long moment as though weighing how much truth to reveal. Finally, he spoke. I need someone to accompany me to the Founders Gala this weekend. Not as an employee, but as my girlfriend. Maya froze, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? You heard correctly, Adrian replied, his gaze unwavering. The gala is one of the most important events of the year. Every major investor and industry leader will attend. Unfortunately, certain rivals have been spreading the notion that I'm too consumed by work, incapable of forming meaningful relationships. It has begun to affect negotiations. If I appear at the gala with someone intelligent, graceful, and authentic, it shifts the narrative. Her mind raced, tripping over his words. But why me? Surely you could... Because, he interrupted gently, you're the kind of person they wouldn't expect. Not a model for hire or a socialite with rehearsed charm. You're genuine, you're real, and that is precisely what they'll believe. Maya felt warmth rise in her cheeks, uncertain whether it was flattery or shock. Mr. Blake, I've never been to anything like a gala. I wouldn't know what to wear, what to say. That's why you're perfect, he said, leaning forward. For the first time, she noticed something softer in his expression, almost vulnerable. I don't need someone trained to play high society games. I need someone who can remind that room of authenticity. And I trust you, the word trust lingered. In an industry where everyone fought for recognition, it was rare to be singled out for integrity. Maya hesitated, her hands twisting lightly in her lap. And if I say yes, what exactly would it involve? One evening, Adrian explained. We arrive together, greet people, share a few dances, stay until the main auction and leave together. I'll ensure you have a proper dress and everything else you might need. In return, I'll provide you with a financial bonus, say 3 months' salary. Maya's breath caught. 3 months' salary could clear half her student loans, give her breathing space she'd been chasing for years. But beyond money, a quieter thought tugged at her. Adrian Blake, the untouchable CEO, was asking her, not anyone else, for this unusual role. May I ask something? She ventured. Of course. Why not bring someone from your world? You must know plenty of women who could play this part more convincingly. For a moment, Adrian didn't answer. Then he stood walking toward the window, his silhouette outlined against the skyline, because they would be playing a part. You wouldn't. You have no agenda, no hidden motive. I've watched how you treat people here. You don't flatter superiors or gossip about colleagues. You notice details others miss. You listen. In truth, he turned back to her, and for the first time, the mask of corporate confidence slipped just enough for her to glimpse the man beneath. You're the only person in this company who has ever looked at me as a human being rather than just a title. The honesty of his words struck her. Maya thought back to casual hallway encounters, times she had simply offered a smile or a kind word. She hadn't realized such small gestures could leave an impression. Adrian exhaled slowly. If you'd rather decline, I understand. But I do need an answer by tomorrow morning. Maya rose from her chair, notebook in hand, her mind spinning with possibilities. This is a lot to consider. Take your time, he said quietly. And Maya? Yes? I'm nervous about this too. The admission startled her. Adrian Blake, the man who commanded boardrooms, admitting fear? Yet in his eyes she saw no trickery, only raw honesty. Something inside her shifted, she nodded. I'll think about it. As she left the conference room, the city skyline glittered through the glass walls, but Maya hardly saw it. She had just been asked to step into a role that could change her life, or ruin it. Pretending to be the girlfriend of one of the most powerful men in Crescent City was no small thing. And yet beneath her nerves there was a spark of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. Saturday suddenly felt much closer than it should have been. The gala illusion. The days that followed Adrian Blake's proposal felt strangely unreal for Maya Lopez, as though she were walking through a dream she wasn't sure she had agreed to enter. At her desk, spreadsheets blurred together, her usual focus constantly broken by thoughts of gowns, champagne flutes, and chandeliers she had only ever seen in magazines. Even her roommate Layla noticed the faraway look in her eyes when she returned home late from work, usually with takeout cartons balanced in one hand. On Thursday evening, Maya finally confided in Layla, who nearly dropped her chopsticks in disbelief. Wait, let me get this straight, Layla said, narrowing her eyes. Your boss, Adrian Blake, billionaire CEO, magazine cover material, asked you, the quiet marketing genius who refuses to go to happy hours, To pretend to be his girlfriend at the biggest gala of the year? Maya groaned, pulling a pillow over her face. When you say it out loud like that, it sounds insane. Insane? Maya, it sounds like the plot of one of those romance dramas you always deny watching with me. Layla pried the pillow away. But seriously, what did you say? I told him I'd do it, Maya admitted softly. Layla gasped so loudly their cat darted under the sofa. You did? Maya sat up, wringing her hands. I didn't plan to. But he looked human, Layla, nervous even, and he said he trusted me. No one's ever said that to me in this company before. Her friend's expression softened. Well, then you made the right choice. But if you're going to pull this off, you can't just show up in your office blazer and flats. You need transformation. You need elegance. You need sparkle. Maya groaned again, but Layla was already scrolling through her phone, muttering about boutiques and stylists. By Friday afternoon, Maya found herself swept into a whirlwind she had never known. Dress fittings in plush studios, jewelry selections under soft lights, and consultations with a patient stylist who seemed determined to convince her she was a runway model in disguise. Adrian had kept his promise, arranging for everything to be provided. Yet it wasn't the silk fabric or glittering earrings that unsettled Maya most. It was the thought of walking into a ballroom full of powerful strangers at Adrian's side, pretending to belong in a world that had never been hers. Saturday evening arrived with the crisp bite of autumn, the city bathed in golden twilight. Maya stood before her mirror, her breath catching at her own reflection. The gown chosen for her was a masterpiece of understated elegance, a deep emerald green satin that hugged her figure and flowed gracefully to the floor. The neckline was modest yet sophisticated, paired with delicate silver earrings that caught the light every time she moved. Her dark hair, usually tied back for practicality, cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders, framing her face in a way she barely recognized. Layla circled around her, eyes wide. Maya, you don't just look good, you look breathtaking. Maya smoothed the dress nervously. I feel like I'm in costume. That's the point, Layla said firmly. But remember, you're not pretending to be someone else tonight. You're just showing a version of yourself you don't usually let people see. She placed a hand on Maya's arm. And if anyone dares look down on you, remember, you're walking in there with Adrian Blake and he chose you. That's power. A knock at the door made Maya's pulse leap. Layla grinned. That'll be your boyfriend. When Maya opened the door, Adrian stood in the hallway dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that seemed almost sculpted to him. His usual aura of command was present, but there was something softer in his eyes as they landed on her. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Maya, his voice carried quiet awe. You look extraordinary. Heat rose to her cheeks. Thank you. You don't look so bad yourself. For the first time since she'd known him, Adrian smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. He offered his arm, and as she slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, Maya realized this was no longer rehearsal. This was the beginning of the illusion. The sleek black car that waited outside whisked them through the glittering city streets. Maya gazed out the window at familiar landmarks transformed by nightlights, while Adrian studied her with quiet curiosity. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, she admitted honestly. His lips curved. So am I. The admission eased something in her chest. For the first time, it felt less like employee and CEO, and more like two people stepping into an unknown challenge together. The Continental Grand Hotel loomed ahead, its entrance bathed in golden light. Valets hurried, cameras flashed, and the air buzzed with chatter from the city's elite. As Adrian helped Maya from the car, the world seemed to pause for a heartbeat. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. Cameras shifted toward them, capturing the image of Adrian Blake, perpetually elusive bachelor, arriving not alone, but with a woman at his side. Maya straightened her shoulders, recalling Layla's words. She belonged here as much as anyone. Adrian's hand rested lightly over hers, grounding her as they ascended the steps together. Inside, the ballroom unfolded like something from a dream. Crystal chandeliers bathed the space in warm light. Marble floors gleamed beneath dancing shadows, and tables glittered with fine glassware and cascading floral arrangements. A string quartet filled the air with elegant notes that seemed to vibrate through Maya's chest. Almost immediately, guests began to approach. Investors, CEOs and board members greeted Adrian warmly, their eyes flickering curiously to Maya. Each introduction carried weight, each handshake accompanied by subtle judgments. Maya smiled politely, speaking when prompted, her natural warmth softening the stiffness of the room. To her surprise, people leaned in when she spoke, intrigued by her sincerity in a sea of rehearsed charm. And then came Victoria Hale. She was everything Maya was not, statuesque, perfectly coiffed, her gown dripping with jewels that seemed to announce wealth with every step. As the CEO of Hale Dynamics, Adrian's fiercest competitor, she approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Adrian," she purred, "what a surprise to see you here." Accompanied. Her gaze slid over Maya with the precision of a scalpel. "And who might this be?" "This is Maya Lopez," Adrian said smoothly, his arm tightening slightly against hers. "My partner." Victoria's eyebrows arched, amusement flickering across her face. "Partner? Well, isn't that new?" She extended a hand, her nails sharp as glass. "Maya, was it? And what do you do?" "I work in marketing," Maya replied, meeting her gaze steadily. Victoria's smile widened, just short of condescending. "How quaint." Maya felt heat rise in her chest, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Yes, it is," she said evenly. "Quaint and yet impactful. After all, the best innovation in the world is meaningless if no one knows about it, don't you think?" For the first time, Victoria's smile faltered. Adrian's eyes flicked toward Maya, a glimmer of pride there. The evening unfolded in waves of conversation, introductions, and quiet tests. Maya danced with Adrian under the chandeliers, the world blurring as music carried them across the floor. She had never danced like this before, yet somehow guided by his steady hand, it felt natural. People watched, whispered, and speculated, but more importantly, they believed. As the night deepened, Maya slipped away for a breath of air on the balcony. The cool breeze kissed her skin, grounding her after hours of smiling and speaking. She leaned against the railing, gazing at the glittering city below. "You handled yourself brilliantly tonight." Adrian's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him watching her, a rare softness in his expression. "Was I convincing enough?" she asked lightly. He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "More than convincing, you were unforgettable." Before Maya could reply, voices drifted from the ballroom through the open doors. Two men spoke in hushed tones, their words sharp. She stilled, listening. "Victoria says Blake's distracted. The merger will fall through if she proves he's reckless. He's parading some woman around like a trophy. If that's true, she'll have her leverage." Maya's stomach tightened. She realized then that tonight was more than just a performance. Adrian's business, his reputation, even his future, was hanging in the balance. And somehow she had become part of the storm. The rival strikes. The weeks after the gala had been a whirlwind, but Maya was beginning to find her footing in Adrian's world. She told herself that she was adjusting, that she could manage the sharp eyes and whispered judgments. Yet beneath the polished surface of glamour and business power, storms were gathering. For all the handshakes and champagne toasts, there were rivals who had waited years to see Adrian Blake stumble. And now they believed they had found the perfect weapon to use against him. Maya. It began subtly. A gossip column printed photographs of her entering and leaving the Blake Tower at unusual hours, implying that she was spending nights with the CEO. An anonymous source suggested that Maya had angled for a promotion by catching Adrian's attention. Social media buzzed with threads dissecting her background, her education, even the neighborhood where she grew up. The story they painted was not one of a hard-working, quiet woman, but of a schemer who had found her way into power through charm. At first, Maya laughed it off, assuring herself it would pass, but the laughter grew thin when her own colleagues began treating her differently. Some avoided eye contact, while others made sharp comments disguised as jokes. The office, once her safe place, became a minefield. Adrian noticed her silence during meetings, the way she sat straighter, as though bracing herself for impact. One evening, when he found her working late at her desk with her eyes fixed firmly on the screen, he placed a file down in front of her. "You've read that nonsense, haven't you?" His voice carried the rare weight of concern rather than command. Maya looked up at him, weary but defiant. "It's not nonsense to the people repeating it. To them, it's proof that I don't belong here, that I'm using you." Adrian leaned against her desk, his expression tightening. "Do you think I believe any of that?" She shook her head, but her voice cracked when she whispered, "It doesn't matter if you believe it. The world believes it, and I don't know how much longer I can carry that weight." What neither of them knew yet was that behind the growing storm was Victoria Hale, Adrian's most cunning rival. Victoria had long envied his position and influence, but she was too smart to challenge him head-on. Instead, she attacked through shadows, feeding the media selective leaks, cultivating rumors, and ensuring that Maya was painted as a dangerous distraction. At a private luncheon with several board members, Victoria raised her glass with a thin smile and said, "It's such a shame when promising executives let their personal lives cloud their judgment. Of course, I'm sure Adrian knows what he's doing, though some might say he's already compromised." Her words, dripping with feigned concern, did exactly what she intended. They seeded doubt in men and women who had once admired him without question. The consequences arrived swiftly. The board summoned Adrian to an emergency meeting, where pointed questions were asked. Is your relationship with Ms. Lopez affecting the company's reputation? Can you assure us that she is not influencing your decisions? Have you considered the long-term risks of maintaining such an entanglement? Each question was a blade, and though Adrian's responses were calm, his fury was barely contained. He left the meeting with his jaw tight and his fists clenched, knowing exactly who had orchestrated this campaign. That night, he went to Maya's apartment without warning. She opened the door to find him standing there, exhaustion etched into his features. "They think you're my weakness," he said without preamble, stepping inside. "They think if they can make you look like a liability, I'll have no choice but to cast you aside." Maya felt her chest tighten. "And what will you do?" she asked softly. For a moment he said nothing, only paced the length of her small living room like a caged animal. Then he stopped, meeting her eyes with a raw honesty she had not seen before. "I will stand by you, even if it costs me everything." His words should have reassured her, but instead they filled her with dread. She knew what his empire meant to him, the company he had built, the reputation he had defended with relentless precision. Could she really let him risk it all for her? When he finally left that night, she sat alone in the silence, torn between her heart and her conscience. The following days escalated the tension. Victoria's campaign grew more ruthless, feeding tabloid stories of Maya's supposed ambition, hinting at secrets that didn't exist. An old photograph from Maya's university days surfaced, showing her holding hands with a college boyfriend. It was splashed across headlines with the caption, "Maya Lopez, professional girlfriend?" The humiliation was unbearable. She could no longer walk into the office without feeling the weight of every glance, every whisper. Even her best friend urged her to consider stepping away for her own sanity. When Adrian found her packing up her desk late one evening, her resignation letter trembling in her hands, he froze. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice sharper than she had ever heard. She looked at him with eyes full of pain. "I can't let them destroy you because of me. I never asked for this, Adrian. I never wanted to be the reason your empire crumbles." Her words hit him harder than any accusation from the board. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled with all the things neither of them dared to admit. Then Adrian crossed the room in 2 strides, taking the letter from her hand and tearing it to pieces. "You don't get to decide that for me," he said, his voice low but fierce. "I will not let them define what you are to me. They can strip away everything else, but they will not strip you away." It was a declaration, raw and unpolished, but it left Maya trembling. She wanted to believe him, wanted to surrender to the warmth in his words, but the fear still gnawed at her. Could love, or whatever fragile bond was growing between them, truly stand against the combined weight of power, envy, and ambition? She turned away, blinking back tears, knowing that the days ahead would test them more than anything yet. And as Victoria Hale raised another glass of wine in her penthouse, watching headlines multiply like wildfire, she whispered to herself with satisfaction, "Let's see how long their little fairy tale lasts." What neither of them knew yet was that behind the growing storm was Victoria Hale, Adrian's most cunning rival. Victoria had long envied his position and influence, but she was too smart to challenge him head-on. Instead, she attacked through shadows, feeding the media selective leaks, cultivating rumors and ensuring that Maya was painted as a dangerous distraction. At a private luncheon with several board members, Victoria raised her glass with a thin smile and said, It's such a shame when promising executives let their personal lives cloud their judgment. Of course, I'm sure Adrian knows what he's doing, though some might say he's already compromised. Her words, dripping with feigned concern, did exactly what she intended. They seeded doubt in men and women who had once admired him without question. The consequences arrived swiftly. The board summoned Adrian to an emergency meeting, where pointed questions were asked. Is your relationship with Ms. Lopez affecting the company's reputation? Can you assure us that she is not influencing your decisions? Have you considered the long-term risks of maintaining such an entanglement? Each question was a blade, and though Adrian's responses were calm, his fury was barely contained. He left the meeting with his jaw tight and his fists clenched, knowing exactly who had orchestrated this campaign. That night he went to Maya's apartment without warning. She opened the door to find him standing there, exhaustion etched into his features. They think you're my weakness, he said without preamble, stepping inside. They think if they can make you look like a liability, I'll have no choice but to cast you aside. Maya felt her chest tighten. And what will you do? She asked softly. For a moment he said nothing, only paced the length of her small living room like a caged animal. Then he stopped, meeting her eyes with a raw honesty she had not seen before. I will stand by you, even if it costs me everything. His words should have reassured her, but instead they filled her with dread. She knew what his empire meant to him, the company he had built, the reputation he had defended with relentless precision. Could she really let him risk it all for her? When he finally left that night, she sat alone in the silence, torn between her heart and her conscience. The following days escalated the tension. Victoria's campaign grew more ruthless, feeding tabloid stories of Maya's supposed ambition, hinting at secrets that didn't exist. An old photograph from Maya's university days surfaced, showing her holding hands with a college boyfriend. It was splashed across headlines with the caption, Maya Lopez, professional girlfriend. The humiliation was unbearable. She could no longer walk into the office without feeling the weight of every glance, every whisper. Even her best friend urged her to consider stepping away for her own sanity. When Adrian found her packing up her desk late one evening, her resignation letter trembling in her hands, he froze. What are you doing? He demanded, his voice sharper than she had ever heard. She looked at him with eyes full of pain. I can't let them destroy you because of me. I never asked for this, Adrian. I never wanted to be the reason your empire crumbles. Her words hit him harder than any accusation from the board. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled with all the things neither of them dared to admit. Then Adrian crossed the room in 2 strides, taking the letter from her hand and tearing it to pieces. You don't get to decide that for me, he said, his voice low but fierce. I will not let them define what you are to me. They can strip away everything else, but they will not strip you away. It was a declaration, raw and unpolished, but it left Maya trembling. She wanted to believe him, wanted to surrender to the warmth in his words, but the fear still gnawed at her. Could love, or whatever fragile bond was growing between them, truly stand against the combined weight of power, envy, and ambition? She turned away, blinking back tears, knowing that the days ahead would test them more than anything yet. And as Victoria Hale raised another glass of wine in her penthouse, watching headlines multiply like wildfire, she whispered to herself with satisfaction, let's see how long their little fairy tale lasts. From pretend to forever, the storm reached its peak on a cold Friday morning. Adrian arrived at the Sterling board meeting to find the room already tense, filled with directors whispering in clusters, their eyes snapping to him as he entered. A stack of tabloid articles sat in the middle of the polished mahogany table, like evidence prepared for a trial. Headlines screamed accusations, photographs of Maya splashed across glossy pages, each more invasive and cruel than the last. At the head of the table, Chairman Russell adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat with heavy finality. Adrian, the situation has become untenable. The shareholders are restless, the media is merciless, and our competitors are circling like vultures. The question before us is simple. Can Sterling survive this scandal with Maya Lopez still by your side? The air was thick, oppressive, filled with unspoken demands. Adrian had faced hostile negotiations, billion-dollar mergers, and ruthless rivals. But never had he felt such a collision between his private heart and public duty. He looked around the room, seeing not colleagues but judges waiting for his verdict. Every instinct of the empire builder in him urged him to retreat, to make the pragmatic choice to sacrifice one woman for the preservation of an empire. But then he thought of Maya, the woman who had stepped into his world without armor or agenda, who had given him honesty in a universe of masks. He thought of the quiet dignity in her eyes, even when the world tore her apart, and in that moment, his decision crystallized with a clarity that stunned even him. He rose from his chair, his voice steady but carrying the weight of a man ready to gamble everything. Gentlemen, ladies, for years you've trusted me to build Sterling into a global force, not by bowing to fear but by standing on integrity. You call these stories scandals, but what they truly reveal is your willingness to believe the worst of a woman simply because she does not come from our world of wealth and power. Maya Lopez is not my weakness, she is my strength. She is the reason I remember what this company is supposed to stand for. Innovation, authenticity, courage. If Sterling cannot survive while I stand by her, then perhaps Sterling does not deserve to survive at all. The room erupted into murmurs, some outraged, some stunned. Victoria Hale, who had secured a seat at the board table through her investments, smirked like a cat watching a mouse walk into a trap. So this is the hill you've chosen to die on, she drawled. Adrian turned to her, his gaze sharp enough to cut glass. No, Victoria. This is the hill I choose to live on. It was not just defiance, it was a declaration, one that reverberated beyond the walls of that boardroom. Later that evening, while the business world speculated on the supposed downfall of Adrian Blake, he stood at Maya's apartment door once again. She opened it to find him weary but resolute, his eyes burning with something stronger than exhaustion. Without waiting for her to speak, he stepped inside and took her hands in his. They wanted me to let you go. They wanted me to trade you for my empire. And for a moment I thought maybe I should, because I couldn't bear the thought of you suffering another day because of me. But then I realized something, Maya. The empire means nothing without you. What's the point of building a kingdom if I don't have someone real, someone true to share it with? Her breath caught as he spoke, his words shaking the walls she had tried to keep around her heart. Adrian, she began, but he silenced her with a shake of his head, his grip firm around her fingers. No more pretending. No more contracts or charades. I don't want you to be my girlfriend for show. I want you to be the woman I come home to when the lights go down and the world is quiet. I want you not for a night, not for a gala, but for forever. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling freely down her cheeks as she whispered, But what if they're right? What if I ruin everything for you? Adrian pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. Then let it all burn. Let them strip away the marble floors and the glass towers. Because when it's all gone, the one thing I'll still have, the one thing that truly matters is you. The kiss that followed was not the tentative brush of lips from their staged romance, but something deeper, something raw and undeniable. It was the collision of two worlds that should never have touched, yet somehow fit together perfectly. In that embrace, Maya felt the weight of fear lift from her shoulders, replaced by a strength she had never known. She was no longer just the quiet marketing associate. She was the woman Adrian Blake had chosen over an empire, the woman who reminded him of his own humanity. In the weeks that followed, the narrative began to shift. Journalists who had once mocked her started writing about the courage of a CEO who defied convention to stand by love. Employees who had whispered now looked at Maya with new respect, remembering her quiet competence and seeing it in a new light. Even the board, though reluctant at first, could not ignore the loyalty Adrian inspired by refusing to bow to pressure. Investors returned, reassured not by his compliance but by his conviction. Sterling survived, not in spite of Maya, but because Adrian's stand had redefined what leadership meant.